Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw. Let's just wait for the helicopter to go.
Yeah. Back to China.
It's very strange with the helicopters and recording outside and the heavy sky and the IFC. It's spectacular. Okay, next photo.
So also this place, so during the pandemic when you weren't even allowed to like gather outside in groups of 2.
Yeah.
This was a place where people would go and drink, like a little bit down there, more up here.
Yep.
And then I remember, because I was living in St. Put at the time, so we would come drink here. And there would be like 200 people here.
Right.
And as soon as a cop would come up those stairs, everyone would split off into exact groups of 2. And the cops would just walk around.
Are you 2 or are you 3? Are you 2 or are you 3? I love it.
For a while, they would come out walking with these giant signs or with like little boom boxes that were like, "You must not gather in groups of 3." And just so weird.
That's funny. In this image, this is it. So it's
2 books.
It's 2 books. Okay. So
it's my first and second book.
Okay, so it's a image rendition of 2 covers.
Yep.
The one on the left says "Irreverent Poems for Pretentious People."
That was the first book. So I almost think I like that title better than the title of my third book. That one really set it all for me.
No, I love it. And then the one next to it is "Away with Words." Not away, not away with words, but away with words.
Yeah, a little bit of both. Right.
I love it. Yeah. Poems and translations.
Oh yeah, so for the second book I took some contemporary Danish poets. I went to like a couple open mics there.
Okay.
I made some connections. I reached out to them and I was like, send me a poem.
Okay.
And so I translated some of them into English, which was fun.
Right, okay.
And this happened because I listened to a poem at an open mic in Denmark, and 2 words that rhymed in Danish I had like the perfect English translation for. And it was something about elephants walking, and like the words in Danish rhymed. And it's like it's so chancy, but perambulate, which is an English word for walk, rhymes perfectly with whatever it was, and hits the same cadence. And I was like, it'd be fun to actually translate the whole poem. And then I did that, and then I was like, this is cool. Why don't I have like 10 translations in the book as well?
Wow.
Yeah, so it was a fun little project.
Nice. Away with Words.
Yeah.
Away with Words. And then, so the cover of "Irreverent Poems for Pretentious People" is basically the top half is sort of pink and the bottom is this green, which I don't know if it kind of reminds me of one of those visual illusion things that when you look at it, that the inside would make the green and the pink flip and it would look the same. But in the middle is actually an old style typewriter.
I was looking for the most pretentious object possible to put on the front.
A typewriter is the most
Typewriter's
pretentious?
up there, yeah.
Yeah?
I think it's pretty high up there.
Okay.
Someone,
Oh, especially for a writer and whatever.
Yeah. If in current times you saw someone sitting with a typewriter at Starbucks, you're not thinking, there's the next Hemingway. You're thinking, that guy is an asshole.
Douche.
Yeah. So I was just thinking, what's the most pretentious object I can put on there?
Okay. So I have to ask you, why?
Because it related sort of to the content in my mind.
No, but why these 2 covers?
Okay. So the first, I designed them both.
Nice.
Unlike my third book, where the third cover is better, is designed by a guy called KLR Covers.
Okay.
The first book was published through a company called Proverse. They do some publishing in Hong Kong, although they have their issues, but it's like the only place that publishes poetry.
Yeah.
So for a lot of young poets in Hong Kong who come to Peel or write their first book in English, there's this tension. Do I publish with Proverse, despite all the crap I hear, or do I hold out for something else to pop up, or do I self-publish?
Yeah.
And poetry is a pretty pretentious and slightly elitist art form in some ways, so like self-publishing is looked down on by certainly everyone in the academic space, if not just a lot of people in general. Which is very silly, is hopefully changing, but I don't see it changing very quickly. So after publishing with Proverse for the first one, I was like, I'm never doing that again.
Okay.
So I self-published the second one.
Okay.
Which led actually to the third one sort of is technically not self-published because I started a publishing company.
Oh, nice.
So my hope is to maybe publish other people's works depending on how it goes. So that's Trivial Disaster Publishing. And you know, with this first one going well, I had a couple of people approach me and be like,
I love your aesthetic. Trivial Disaster Publishing.
Yeah.
That's great.
It's a little ice cream cone upside down.
Nice.
The most trivial disaster of them all.
On the floor, yeah.
Yeah. Like,
oh, here comes the helicopter. Hopefully it won't be too loud.
So with this, I was thinking, when you write books, I think there's a honeymoon phase, which I'm currently in with the third book. And then there's a phase later where you look back and you think it's all crap.
Yep.
It just happens. Like I look back at the second book and I really dislike the title.
Yeah.
I look back at the first book and there's some poems in there that were just not.
Well, you've outlived.
Yeah. But I was going to read one from the first, then one from the second. And the one from the first, I think, is probably the strongest piece in there, and the one that has stood the test of time the best.
Okay.
So let me find that one.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. It's called To Stand Watch. And it's about this idea of like, there's a notion that as you get old, you get more conservative. And it's about not wanting to do that, but also the inevitability of it, but also how it's maybe a good thing because you get replaced. You know? It's just. To stand watch. When I'm 65, I hope to stand on the ramparts of a castle built on the convictions and struggles of my generation. Gender equality, gay rights, social responsibility, brick after brick in meticulous construct, laid with passion-fired labor, aged to be the edifice of a new safe conservatism. I hope to stand on the ramparts and look out and see campfires of youth burning in the distance, speaking of new ideas around fires stoked on new kindling. When they storm the castle, I shall put up fighting words enough to test the mettle of their sincerity. And when the ladders reach in the gaps in the structure's crenellation, I hope to step up undaunted. As I am run through at spear point, I hope to bleed gladly and pull myself by the haft of the spear closer to the youth who takes me for his enemy, close enough that I may whisper, "Thank you." So it's about the idea of sort of being, I guess, grateful for people who will inevitably come up with better ideas than you.
Yeah.
And it being okay that you're seen as sort of the old guard.
Right.
And you get a lot of people like that at poetry who are these older but very supportive of the youth type characters, and it's really good to see.
So where did this come up in your head?
For this poem specifically?
No, just in general.
I have no idea. I always liked poetry, and I think at some point in high school, I studied English Lit to the end of high school, and it was probably my favorite subject.
Oh, wow.
And then at some point in university, I went to the Philosophy Society, and they had like an open mic poetry night. I found it very fun, and I just kind of stored that in the back of my mind, like, this is fun.
Yeah.
I had random notes, you'd make when you're not paying attention in class and stuff. And then kind of nothing happened until I went to Field Street Poetry years later.
Wow.
But yeah, there's not this, I don't know what the answer is to that. Like, I feel like a lot of people are like, oh, the only way to be a writer is to be one of those people that just has to write.
Right.
Which I hope isn't true.
Well, okay. My response to that is, if that's how you got to writing, and that is to think that's the only way, then that's the only way for you. And for me, it's all about like, well, there's different paths to there's evidence that people get to writing through different paths, and kind of like whatever works, whatever floats your boat, really.
Yeah, I agree, and it's because I run an open mic, so I kind of have to think like that, right? People come in from all angles, right? In fact, some of the most interesting people to hear are the ones who are like leaving these high-powered board meetings where they're just like, this was so dumb, so I wrote a poem about it. And, like, those poems end up hilarious.
Yeah. So my first degree was in creative writing, and I did a lot of like spoken word, poetry.
Oh yeah, because you told me about the group. Yes, I remember now. Yeah.
And so, for example, when you say, oh, it's kind of elitist, and it's that whole thing of poetry is dead, long live poetry, right? And so it's probably the most worthless thing you could do is to sit and write poetry, right? In a way, because it's not this it's not like poetry books sell by the hundreds of thousands or millions, right?
Oh, they don't sell at all.
Yeah. So
you straight up, no matter how good I think you are, if you were in this context in Hong Kong or whatever, I don't think you could make money.
You couldn't make a living. No
way.
No, there's no way. No.
Yeah, and it's a weird little time in poetry, I think, as well, with social media and the way things go. The only poets that I know of that are like sort of hitting it big in some sense are like the Rupi Kaurs of the world. If you know, do you know who she is? She has a book called Milk and Honey, I think, which is the best-selling poetry book of the last 10 years or whatever. And I bought it up. I was like, oh, I should definitely read this. I don't actually read a lot of poetry, but I was like, I was hearing about this.
Right.
And man, they're really not for me. They're essentially like 10-word poems on average. They're like tweets. They're like tweets about breakups.
Right.
And they're so often just built around the same structure of like taking a semi-normal phrase and then sort of flipping it. Like, we said goodbye in so long, why did we say goodbye for so long?
Right.
End of poem. Like, just not for me.
Okay, that's it. It's not for you, and that kind of reminds me of that movie of the with the superhero, the not superheroes, like something men, so Mystery Men maybe or something, where like Mr. Mysterio, who would just sort of he'd say something and he'd just sort of flip it backwards to make it sound mysterious, and you're like, okay.
Yeah, and that is an effect that can like work in places, and I think it's a little bit like swearing in poetry. You have to use it in a very limited amount for it to have an impact.
Right.
Or in a super excessive amount.
Yeah.
You either say fuck once or you say it 70 times.
Yeah.
In the middle.
On that,
a helicopter will interrupt your poem.
Fuck! Helicopter! Fucking helicopter!
Poetry is a lot like the rotary blades of a helicopter. Poetry is a lot like the rotary blades of that stupid helicopter. And I am the stabilizing thingy at the back.
That's great. So it's, in a way, it's the most useless thing, and it could be self-indulgent and all this stuff, and yet fundamentally, living in Hong Kong, one of my clients got me to do an MBA.
Yeah.
Of all the things, of all the subjects, maybe religious studies is the least attractive to me, and MBA to me is a really like.
I would totally do religious studies or theology. Yeah, I mean, it's very useless in that sense, but it's the most useless thing in the world, but it's just as useless as everything else.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, nothing has any intrinsic value.
Sure, there we go.
So
nice.
It's not like banking or like.
No, it's not utilitarian, which I think was what makes it great.
Yes, but nor is banking. But I guess it's just, I don't know. I would say I'm a nihilist.
Yeah.
Which maybe makes it easier to see the value in poetry, because there is no value in poetry or anything else unless you place it there yourself, and even then there isn't.
Yeah.
But, it's like a castle built on sand. You can build it again. Oh, I value it. But I know that there's no such thing as value, but I value it.
So here's something. I love the fact that you have this philosophical channel, vein, branch in your head. So, okay. Chat GPT, like cat I farted. Because you heard this? Like
no.
Chat GPT, right?
I know Chat GPT.
Okay, so if you say cat, if you read Chat GPT in French, Chat GPT, it means cat I farted.
That's
so
funny.
Whenever I talk about it, I always say cat I farted.
Okay.
Anyway, so I got access to it.
Yep.
And I was like, okay, let's see what this is like. So I basically said, compose a poem on the theme of poetry is dead, long live poetry.
Okay.
And it literally took 30 seconds, boom. It was like it was in rhyming couplets or whatever. It was like 15 lines long. And then I said, translate it into Hungarian. So translate it to Hungarian. I should have translated it into Danish.
That would be funny, yeah.
So, given who you are and how you think and open mic nights and how do you interpret that little sentence of having a AI generate poetry?
Yeah, I love it. I'm great with it.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd also consider myself a transhumanist. I don't see anything wrong with that. I think it's awesome. I think it's going to be really interesting. I can't wait to see where it goes. Yeah, I think maybe it's also like we're like, look, isn't it crazy that the AI can do this?
Right.
And I think I'm sometimes kind of thinking, isn't it interesting that humans can't do that? Like that, that prompt you said it. I think most humans couldn't do that.
Right.
Right? Like, does that, if we're saying, by the virtue of it being able to do this, it's intelligent.
No.
But the tasks we're setting it are already things that 99% of people can't do.
Right.
What does that say about us? Yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting. I think the translation element will also be especially interesting. There's a, do you know the poem Jabberwocky?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Jabberwocky, I think I first came across it, or the idea of translating it, in the book Gödel Bach, which is also a book I really like. And the problem with translating it is because it's written in fake English, where words are meant to sound like other words, right? So instead of saying like it was brilliant, he says "'twas brillig," and it's like softer than brilliant somehow, and you get a sense for it. So when you translate it to French, you need a word that instead of connoting the English words, connotes these other French words instead. So it's really complicated translation.
Yeah.
And if you read it in French and German, it sounds the same, but it sounds different. Like certain parts sound much harsher because it's German.
Right.
And that's like, I'm very interested in where it goes with problems that are kind of semi-impossible for humans. Like how do you translate Jabberwocky into another language?
Okay. That's great.
But no, I gotta get access to it. I have to set up a VPN and do it. I'm very excited.
Right. Because you said you have to set up a VPN and you're very excited, we're going to use that to go into the next photo.
Okay, I thought you were going to say we're going to use that to go into our sponsor, NordVPN.
I wish. So is life really a gift? Really? Can you make every second count? That's the whole point of the podcast. So if you like what you've seen, and you're inspired, because that really is my mission, then please give it a like, subscribe, and share.
Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting.